Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a restful weekend, and I wish you all a productive week ahead. Let's begin with growing tensions in the Taiwan Strait. On Saturday, Taiwan warned off Chinese Coast Guard ships that entered its restricted waters near the Taiwan-controlled Kinmen Islands, which hug the PRC coast. We've seen increased tensions in these waters after 2 Chinese nationals died while trying to flee Taiwan's Coast Guard after the boat entered the prohibited waters last month. Taiwan's Coast Guard said 4 Chinese Coast Guard boats on Saturday morning entered the restricted waters, adding that the Chinese boats stayed for just over an hour. China's Coast Guard conducted patrols near the islands nearby on Friday as well. Taiwan's Coast Guard said in a statement, quote, "The move has seriously impacted traffic and safety. To avoid triggering naval incidents, we urge them to stop such behaviors." End quote. UK-based Reuters writes that on Friday, Taiwan also sent several boats at China's request to help search for Chinese fishermen who went overboard near the Matsu Islands in the northern end of the Taiwan Strait. An unnamed senior Taiwan security official told Reuters that Beijing is, quote, "sending out confusing messages," end quote, by continuing its harassment of Taiwan while also asking for Taipei's assistance on dealing with maritime incidents, expressing, quote, "We're clueless. We tried to save their fishermen yesterday, and today they are baring their teeth and claws," end quote. Meanwhile, a war game conducted by the non-partisan Taiwan Center for Security Studies think tank has found that energy reserves, the electricity grid, storage facilities, and crisis planning all fall far short of securing even basic power supplies in case of a blockade or missile attack by Beijing. The 2-day tabletop war game from last week is Taiwan's first such public exercise to focus on civilian infrastructure, with 180 people participating, including foreign academics. Liang Shiyun, professor at the Research Center for Taiwan Economic Development at National Central University, warned that based on this war game, energy resilience is a serious Achilles heel, expressing, quote, "We have power supply shortfalls even now, not to mention in wartime," end quote, and called for the reversing of plans to phase out nuclear energy by 2025, a core DPP policy. Coal, gas, and oil still account for 82% of Taiwan's power generation, and all must be imported and are therefore deeply vulnerable to disruption in wartime. UK-based Financial Times writes that the driving force behind the war game was Richard Chen, a former Defence Vice Minister and Navy commander who, as a KMT candidate, was elected to Parliament in January. Chen said findings from the exercise would be used in drafting a national security strategy that he planned to propose. The war game made clear, the outlet explains, the extreme challenges Taiwan would face in supplying its population and massive semiconductor industry with power in case of external disruption. Under a scenario that China intercepts at least some fossil fuel shipments, Taiwan would run out of gas in a matter of weeks, participants said. The outlet adds, quote, "Greater Taipei, with its concentration of population, industry, and communication infrastructure, relies on supplies from power plants in the center and south of the island, but all transmission runs through 3 main bottlenecks," end quote. The previously mentioned Liang said that electromagnetic or cyber attacks taking out or damaging any of the 3 could leave the country's capital and main industrial hubs dark. And on this topic, interestingly, Taipei is also racing to build an alternative to Starlink, the satellite internet service operated by Elon Musk's rocket company SpaceX. Taiwan experiences regular cyber attacks and near-daily incursions into its waters and airspace by the People's Liberation Army, and its infrastructure is fragile. Taiwan's fiber optic cables that connect it to the internet have seen about 30 breaks since 2017, mostly from anchors dragged by many ships in the area. In an interview last week, Liao Jinhuang, a director at the government-sponsored Industry Technology Research Institute, explained that the war in Ukraine amplified the sense of this vulnerability for Taiwan's leaders, expressing, quote, "The Ukraine-Russia war gave us a profound reflection. Even if the cost to build it is high, in a special scenario, the value of having our own constellation is unlimited." End quote. Musk's reliance on China's large auto market for his Tesla EVs have made some question whether SpaceX would be a reliable provider of its Starlink services. Indeed, last month, US Representative Mike Gallagher asserted that by not making Starlink available in Taiwan, SpaceX could be in breach of its contract to make the service accessible to the US government worldwide. US-based The New York Times, reporting on the story, writes that building a network of satellites manufactured, launched and navigated from Taiwan would require billions of dollars and years of research and testing. Taipei has said that it wants to send its first communications satellite into orbit by 2026, with a second to follow within 2 years, while developing 4 more test satellites. Taiwan pledged $1.3 billion for Taiwan's space program to develop the best of these tests into a satellite internet network entirely made and controlled from Taiwan. As of recording, more than 40 Taiwanese companies are making parts in the satellite supply chain. Next up, we move to the Chinese economy. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, as always, it's a huge help if you can like and subscribe. This is my only ask if you do get some value from this video, and it's the only way in which the channel can grow. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on subscriber support to keep going. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, today saw the publication of a lot of official data for the month of January. Economic figures for January and February are typically combined in China to smooth out variations from the Lunar New Year period, which can fall in either month depending on the calendar year. Some viewers do not accept official economic numbers from Beijing as sufficiently accurate or reliable. While this is understandable, we still need to take note of them as the market and analysts as well as policymakers react to them. And when official numbers are poor, this is especially telling. According to data published by the National Bureau of Statistics today, Monday, retail sales rose 5.5%, better than forecast, while industrial production increased 7%, compared with estimates of 5% growth. Fixed asset investment rose 4.2%, more than the forecast of 3.2%. The unemployment rate for cities was 5.3% in February. Online retail sales of physical goods rose by 14.4% from a year ago during the first 2 months of this year. These are somewhat positive numbers. However, the housing sector still looks very sick. Investment into real estate fell by 9% in the first 2 months of the year from a year ago. However, investment in manufacturing increased by 9.4% during the same time. Regular viewers will know why, and we explored this in Saturday's video. According to a Goldman Sachs analysis using a weighted average of official figures, the average property price for 70 major Chinese cities fell by 4.5% in February from January on a seasonally adjusted annualized basis. That's steeper than the 3.5% month-on-month drop in property prices in January, suggesting that price declines may be accelerating. What this tells us is that China is seeing some modest economic rebound, but it is still dragged by the housing crisis as well as weak consumption. And it appears that overinvestment in manufacturing may have replaced overinvestment in housing as a new source of unhealthy growth. Michelle Lam, Greater China economist at Société Générale SA, expressed on the data today, quote, "The economy is stabilizing with the help of supply-side stimulus and some improvement in export demand. Consumer demand remained a weak spot." End quote. And even Beijing admits it still has a very bumpy road ahead. With this release today, the National Bureau of Statistics spokesperson expressed, quote, "Overall, in January-February, China's economy continued to rebound, with various macro policies coming into effect. But we also need to see that the external environment is increasingly complex, grim, and uncertain, and the problem of insufficient domestic demand still remains. The foundation for the economy's rebound needs still to be further solidified." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Monday, have a productive week, and I will see you all tomorrow.